the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, says that Algeria will keep representing the voices of the Arab world and Africa at the Security Council. And regarding Syria, he reiterated Algeria's support for Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity and the importance of dialogue between the Syrian parties. And as the Israeli occupation continues its attacks on Gaza, the UN has called on the world's health workers to suspend their ties with the Israeli occupying authorities in response to the collapse of the health system. And those were the major developments. Asya Bakar, good afternoon. The Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, has stressed that 2024 has been a year of reform for the Algerian diplomacy and of consolidation of its position at the regional and international levels. In a press conference devoted to the Algerian diplomacy in 2024, Mr. Attaf affirmed that this year has been marked by unprecedented conflicts and wars amid a tense context.
لقد شاءت الأقدار
It happened that Algeria has joined the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member amid such an international context marked by the threats and challenges. And due to such sensitive context and the complexity of her mission, Algeria took up the challenge to contribute as much as it can to resolving cases tabled at the UN Central Body.
Ahmed Attaf also affirmed that Algeria, as a permanent member at the Security Council, contributed to dealing with the questions tabled at this UN body, defending the principles of the international law and the resolutions of international legality. The Algerian diplomacy chief stressed that this year has been characterized by dangerous, if not catastrophic, international developments, notably the excessive use of violence and force by the most powerful against the most oppressed. Mr. Attaf said 2024 was marked by the violation of international law in full view of everyone and the disregard of international legality, with total impunity as a means of imposing domination over oppressed people. He added that this year witnessed attempts to silence international organizations, notably the UN, in order to weaken their role and establish a new order characterized by egocentrism and unilateralism. And also, the Minister of Foreign Affairs stressed that these dangerous developments have imposed a new reality whose repercussions have been felt throughout the world, notably in the Arab world and Africa.
Africa is in the heart of our strategy. This is an intangible and permanent fact, and this is evident. It happened that we went through phases marked by conflicts and economic hardships, but we have never been through such a situation where none of the 5 regions of the continent is spared conflicts, none which creates a new challenging situation. Foreign interferences always complicate reaching political solutions.
And as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, Algeria is committed to contributing to dealing with the issues raised before this UN body in accordance with the clear instructions given by the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, noting that the President had insisted on 4 main areas.
The President of the Republic has always insisted on 4 major points. The first one is that Algeria will constantly represent the voices of the Arab world and Africa at the UN Security Council. Algeria will keep advocating for the concerns of the Arab and African peoples and states and for their aspirations and ambitions in full loyalty and honesty. The efforts made by our country during the first year of its mandate at the Security Council was hailed and backed by all the Arab African states.
Ahmed Attaf stressed that Algeria constantly works to be the Arab and African voice of the Security Council.
ففيما يخص العالم العربي
Concerning the Arab world, our focus will continue on the Palestinian cause. Algeria will hold a Security Council ministerial meeting that aims to discuss the latest development in the occupied Palestinian territories, in particular, and the Middle East in general. As for Africa, the focus is going to be on the issue of counter-terrorism through the organization of a Security Council ministerial meeting to discuss the scourge of terrorism and its spread across the corners of our continent, especially that this scourge represents the biggest and most prominent threat to the security and stability of African countries.
The Algerian foreign minister stressed that his country will dedicate its mandate at the Security Council to the defense of just causes, notably the Palestinian and Sahrawi causes, adding that Algeria has relaunched the question of the full adhesion of the state of Palestine to the UN on a fair basis.
لماذا هذا التركيز على القبول بعضوية؟
Why is there this focus on the acceptance of Palestinians' membership to the United Nations, even before the completion of negotiations? Some say that the Palestinian state will be established and will join the United Nations as a result of a process of negotiations. However, we say that it is necessary to preemptively formalize the Palestinian state and its membership to the UN as an objective of the negotiations.
And regarding Syria, the foreign minister explained that Algeria's positions on Syria are clear and are based on 3 principles. Let's listen.
لدينا سفارة في سوريا تشتغل بصفة عادية.
We have an embassy in Syria that operates normally and has all the context it should have. The core of this issue is the fate of the future of Syria. Concerning this point, Algeria's stance is very clear. The stance is based on 3 pillars. The first is that Syria is open to everyone, and all Syrians contribute to the building of its future. Syria's sovereignty and its territorial unity is the second pillar on which Algeria's stance is based. As to the third pillar of our stance, it relies on the United Nations as the best framework to supervise any dialogue between the Syrian parties aiming to shape Syria's future.
At the end of his speech, Ahmed Attaf said Algeria will continue its efforts and initiatives during the second year of its mandate at the Security Council, which will begin with the presidency of the Security Council from January 1st, 2025, in order to highlight the issues that concern the Arab world and the African continent. The Secretary of State to the Minister of Foreign Affairs responsible or in charge of National Community Abroad, Sofiane Shaib, has received the Speaker of the National Civil Society Observatory, Noureddin Ben Brahim, accompanied by members of the Observatory representing the national community settled abroad. The meeting gave an opportunity to exchange views regarding the community established abroad and to discuss ways of dealing with their concerns in line with the guidelines of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune. And to the Middle East now, as the Israeli occupation continued its attacks on Gaza, the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, called on all health workers of the world to suspend their ties with the Israeli occupying authorities in response to the collapse of the health system. In a message posted on social media, she urged all the health workers to act in such concrete way to strongly denounce the total destruction of the Palestinian health system in Gaza. Meanwhile, the UN Special Rapporteur stressed that every Palestinian life that could and should have been saved in Gaza, the health workers had been tested and had failed many times. She said that no effort should be spared to save the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital, physician Hussam Abu Safiya, who was arrested in the aftermath of the Israeli assault on the hospital. The fate of the physician who was arrested together with at least 450 members of the hospital's medical staff is still unknown. In this connection, the doctor's son, Idris Abu Safiya, sent a message to the international institutions and human rights organizations, and more particularly the World Health Organization, to take an urgent and immediate action to put pressure on the Israeli occupation to force it to release his father.
نحن عائلة الدكتور حسام أبو صفية مدير مستشفى كمال عدوان.
We, the family of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, director of Kamal Adwan Hospital, send you this message, laden with pain and concern for the fate of our father, who was arrested by the Israeli occupying forces while carrying out his humanitarian duty. During this period, my father lost his beloved son, and our brother Ibrahim, and he himself was seriously injured and still suffering from its effects to this moment. Despite that, our father continued to carry out his duty with all sincerity. Today, while he is being forced to stay in the Israeli State Ayman detention camp, known for its brutality against the prisoners there, we have received testimonies from released detainees confirming that he was subjected to humiliation and abuse, including forcing him to undress and using him as a human shield. We called upon all international institutions and human rights organizations, especially the World Health Organization and the Med Global NGO, and every person of living conscience, and all the doctors in the world to take an urgent and an immediate action to pressure the occupying authorities to release my father, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, before he meets the fate of many doctors and medical workers.
This came as the UN High Commission for Human Rights affirmed that the health system in Gaza was about to collapse on account of the relentless Israeli attacks on the territory. In a report issued today, it recorded that the Israeli attacks had disastrous effects on the Palestinians' access to health and medical care. And back to the country, on behalf of the Algerian government, the Minister of Communication, Mohamed Mziane, signed the Register of Condolences following the death of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter at the headquarters of the U.S. Embassy in Algiers. The Minister of Communication was accompanied by the Secretary of State to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of African Affairs, Baghta Salman Mansouri. In a message of condolences sent following the death of the former President of the United States of America and Algeria's friend Jimmy Carter, Mr. Mziane extended on behalf of the Algerian government the condolences to the family of the deceased and to all the friendly American people. And in Sudan, 4 people were killed and 9 others were wounded in an attack launched by the Rapid Support Forces on a camp for displaced people in the town of Al-Fasher in the center of the western state of North Darfur. The Rapid Support paramilitary forces launched a bombardment on the Abu Shouk camp for displaced persons in Al-Fasher. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for making 2025 a new beginning in his message for the new year. Reflecting on 2024, he stated that hope has been hard to find, with wars causing enormous pain, suffering, and displacement.
Throughout 2024, hope has been hard to find. Wars are causing enormous pain, suffering, and displacement. Inequalities and divisions are rife, fueling tensions and mistrust. And today, I can officially report that we have just endured a decade of deadly heat. The top 10 hottest years on record have happened in the last 10 years, including 2024. This is climate breakdown in real time. We must exit this road to ruin, and we have no time to lose. In 2025, countries must put the world on a safer path by dramatically slashing emissions and supporting the transition to a renewable future. It is essential, and it is possible. Even in the darkest days, I've seen hope power change. I see hope in activists, young and old, raising their voices for progress. I see hope in the humanitarian heroes overcoming enormous obstacles to support the most vulnerable people. I see hope in developing countries fighting for financial and climate justice. I see hope in the scientists and innovators breaking new ground for humanity. And I saw hope in September when world leaders came together to adopt the Pact for the Future. The Pact is a new push to build peace through disarmament and prevention, to reform the global financial system so it supports and represents all countries, to push for more opportunities for women and young people, to build guardrails so technologies put people over profits and rights over runaway algorithms. and always to stick to the values and principles enshrined by human rights, international law, and the United Nations Charter. There are no guarantees for what's ahead in 2025, but I pledge to stand with all those who are working to forge a more peaceful, equal, stable, and healthy future for all people. Together we can make 2025 a new beginning, not as a world divided, but as nations united.
And that was the message of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the occasion of the 2025 New Year. And now let's listen to a program devoted to the major events that mark the African continent. The program is compiled and presented by Mariam Barshi.
The humanitarian funding requirements for Africa remain staggering throughout 2024.